My name is Charlotte, and I married Mickey when I was 25. We met at a party. Mickey always told me, you can be a stay-at-home wife if you want. My income is enough for us to live comfortably, but I loved my job and kept working at the company I joined right after high school. In the second year of our marriage, I decided to quit my job. The reason was a phone call from my father-in-law. He told me my mother-in-law had collapsed. I cared a lot about my kind and gentle mother-in-law. Since Mickey couldn't leave work, I rushed to see her alone. When I arrived, she smiled weakly at me from her hospital bed, surrounded by tubes. She wasn't in immediate danger, but her condition left her needing care. We had to decide who would take care of her before she was discharged. At first, I thought Angelina, my unmarried sister-in-law who lived with her parents, would handle it. She worked mostly from home, so it seemed logical, but Angelina firmly refused. She even told her mother in the hospital, I'm not just sitting around at home, I can't take care of Mom, you need to manage yourself better. Her words shocked me. How could she say something so cold when her mother was unwell? Later, Angelina called Mickey and insisted on a meeting at the family home. Mickey and I went there to discuss the situation with Angelina and my father-in-law. At the meeting, Angelina repeatedly said, I can't take care of Mom. I don't know how to manage the housework now that she's unwell. Father-in-law, who had always relied on his wife for everything, also didn't seem willing to help. Mickey tried to convince Angelina to take care of their mother, but she refused every time. It became clear they were expecting me to do it. I felt attached to my job. I'd been there since high school, but I couldn't stand watching the family argue and push the responsibility onto someone else. My mother-in-law had been so kind to me, and I wanted to support her. So, I made my decision. I said, I'll quit my job and take care of her. We'll live together from now on. Please treat me well. My father-in-law thanked me warmly, saying, Thank you, Charlotte, but Angelina didn't seem happy at all. Mickey asked me, Are you sure about this? If it's too much, we can hire a professional to take care of Mom. I nodded and said, It's okay. I felt I owed a lot to my mother-in-law. Hiring a professional would cost money, and I worried it might make her uncomfortable. I believed it would be better for her to be cared for by family, even though I was just her daughter-in-law. I knew my father-in-law wasn't someone who handled responsibilities well, and Angelina had a mean-spirited personality. I was anxious about living with them, but I quit my job, moved in, and started our new life together. Living with my in-laws turned out to be even harder than I expected. Mother-in-law's health made her feel frustrated and embarrassed. She often apologized to me, saying, I'm so sorry you have to take care of me, even for something as simple as helping her to the bathroom. Seeing her like that broke my heart. On top of that, Angelina's bullying became a heavy emotional burden. I came from a family without much money and had worked since high school instead of going to college. Angelina often mocked my education. For example, while eating the food I cooked, she'd talk to father-in-law about work and suddenly say, Oh, sorry, Charlotte, this conversation might be too complicated for someone who only finished high school. I shouldn't have brought it up. Or she'd say, You're just a lowly high school graduate daughter-in-law, so at least take care of Mom properly. Mother-in-law would scold her whenever she overheard, saying, Don't say such things to Charlotte. Angelina didn't like being scolded, so she started badmouthing me behind my back when mother-in-law wasn't around. She'd say things like, I have a respectable job, and Charlotte's just a high school graduate. It's only natural for her to do the housework, but at least cook something that tastes good for once. It's always terrible. One day, while I was cooking, she said this again. I even thought about not serving her a meal at all. Despite everything, I held back. When Angelina found a spot I hadn't cleaned perfectly, she'd loudly say things like, Wow, the trashy daughter-in-law can't even tell the difference between dirt and trash. Look at all this garbage piled up. Even then, I didn't respond. I didn't want anyone, especially my mother-in-law, to find out that Angelina and I weren't getting along. It would have been too much for her to handle. When my mother-in-law asked, Angelina isn't being mean to you, is she? I'd smile and say, I'm fine. Mickey often worried about me too, asking, Are you sure you're not pushing yourself too hard? I lied to him as well, replying, I'm fine. Mickey worked hard under a strict boss, and I didn't want to add family issues to his stress. My father-in-law, on the other hand, acted like he didn't notice how much I was being insulted. To him, it probably didn't matter what Angelina said to me as long as someone was taking care of the housework. I reminded myself why I was doing this, for my mother-in-law, who had always been kind to me, and for Mickey. These thoughts kept me going as I cared for her for an entire year. Then, one day, my mother-in-law passed away peacefully in her sleep. At the funeral, Angelina accused me through tears, saying, "Mama died because you didn't take proper care of her. You're such a useless, trashy daughter-in-law." Her words hit me hard. I had done everything I could for my mother-in-law, but now I couldn't stop wondering if it was my fault. Maybe I had missed something, and maybe I wasn't good enough. During the funeral, I felt completely numb, like an empty shell. Mickey was kind and tried to comfort me, but Angelina kept making comments whenever he wasn't around. After the funeral, Angelina kept saying things like, "You're really useless." With my mother-in-law gone, there was no reason for me to keep living with my in-laws. One day, as I stood in my suit looking at her empty bed, my father-in-law approached me and pleaded, "Please, Charlotte, my wife has passed away, but can't you continue living with us?" He couldn't do any housework, and I couldn't imagine Angelina stepping up either. It was clear he wanted me to stay on as a housekeeper. I was shocked, but more than anything, I was appalled that he'd make such a request right after my mother-in-law's funeral. I thought, this man only thinks about himself. I didn't answer right away. I told him, "I need to consult with Mickey, I can't decide on my own." He clung to me, begging, "Please, I'm begging you," but I stood firm, saying I'd talk to Mickey first. The conversation ended without any resolution. A few days later, Mickey said to me, "Charlotte, Mom has passed away. There's no need to live together anymore. Let's move out and live just the two of us. You've been through so much, haven't you?" I felt a huge sense of relief. I wanted to end this cohabitation too. With my mother-in-law gone, there was no reason to stay with Angelina, who insulted me, or with my father-in-law, who treated me like a housekeeper. Grateful for Mickey's understanding, we decided to leave the in-laws' house and start fresh as a couple. Our plan to move out was completely crushed by Angelina. "What? I won't allow you to leave," she shouted furiously when Mickey and I told her and my father-in-law about our decision. "Saying something like this right after Mom's gone is too heartless." Mickey defended me, saying, "It's not heartless. Charlotte took really good care of Mom. She deserves to be free now." Angelina snapped back, "A high school graduate like her can't find a job now. If she can't be useful to society, she should at least stay here and do housework to be useful to Dad and me." Mickey stood up for me again. "Charlotte was excellent at her job. You have no right to talk to her like that." Despite his protests, Angelina stormed out of the room, yelling, "Neither Mickey nor Charlotte is leaving this house." The discussion ended abruptly. But Mickey wasn't deterred. "We can just leave on our own," he said, and began looking for a new place. I started preparing for the move too, balancing housework and property searches while keeping things orderly to avoid Angelina's complaints. Unfortunately, Angelina noticed and started sabotaging me. When I organized our belongings, she'd scatter them around, shouting, "Heartless person, I'll never let you leave this house." When I made calls to real estate agents, she'd snatch my phone and tell them, "Please ignore that conversation, it's not happening." Her behavior became completely out of control. Mickey confronted her every time, but she just screamed back, "Your wife is the worst, you have no eye for women." Nothing ever changed. One evening during dinner, when Mickey and I were at our wits' end, Angelina suddenly spoke to me in an unusually cheerful tone. "Charlotte, tomorrow my fiancé is coming over. I know you're a useless piece of trash, but try to use your brainless head and read the room, okay?" I was used to being berated at the dinner table when Mickey wasn't around, but the word fiancé coming out of Angelina's mouth caught me off guard. I couldn't help but think, there's actually a man in the world who wants to marry her? It was rude, but I was genuinely shocked. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me to be a good girl tomorrow, and I responded vaguely, ending the day doing housework as usual. The next day, Angelina dressed more stylishly than I'd ever seen her and brought her fiancé, Randolph, to the house. He wore a well-fitted suit, was polite, and seemed intelligent. Again, I thought to myself, why would someone like him want to marry Angelina? As I prepared drinks, I overheard their conversation in the living room. Angelina was speaking in a sweet, cajoling voice to Randolph and my father-in-law. "That girl you saw earlier is Mickey's wife. She can't do anything. I do all the housework in this house, and I worked so hard to take care of our late mom. Honestly, I think Mom could have lived longer if that girl hadn't stressed her out so much." I froze. Her words felt like a slap in the face. I had been holding back for so long, enduring her insults so I wouldn't burden Mickey or my mother-in-law, but this time, the anger I'd suppressed all year came rushing out. Everything, every chore, every moment spent taking care of mother-in-law, was my work. Angelina never helped with anything. Determined, I walked into the living room with the drinks. Smiling, I greeted Randolph. "Hello, as you were introduced, I'm the high school graduate, bottom of the barrel, useless trash. Nice to meet you." Angelina let out a panicked shout. "What are you doing?" But I continued calmly. "Angelina really guides me well. She evaluates every meal I make as tasteless, laughs while calling me trash cleaning trash, and blames me for mother-in-law's early passing because of my so-called incompetence." Angelina snapped. "What are you saying?" She stormed over and yanked my hair, screaming, "Stop it." Randolph looked shocked and confused, stammering, What is going on?" I felt sorry for him. Clearly, he had never seen this side of Angelina, but I hoped this moment would make him rethink marrying her. I felt like I had saved Randolph from a terrible situation, so I excused myself mentally for causing the chaos. "Well then, the trash will leave now," I said before walking out of the in-laws' house, taking only my valuables. Father-in-law sat silently, not wanting to get involved, while Angelina raged furiously and Randolph, near tears, tried to calm her down. Watching their reactions felt oddly refreshing. I left and went to stay at my parents' house. When I explained everything to them, they were shocked by Angelina's behavior and father-in-law's indifference. "Do as you please from now on, Charlotte," they told me. For the first time in a long while, I relaxed and felt at peace. That evening, Mickey came to my parents' house after a long day at work. He had been yelled at by Angelina, who blamed him for everything. Unable to get a straight answer from her, he learned from father-in-law that I had left and came straight to me. "We should have moved out sooner," he said. "I knew my sister and father had been tormenting you, and I'm sorry I couldn't stop it. From now on, I'll always protect you. If you'll still have me, I want you to stay with me as my wife forever." I apologized, saying, "Mickey, I'm sorry for ruining Angelina's engagement. She's your sister, after all." But Mickey hugged me tightly and reassured me, "Charlotte, you did nothing wrong." I stayed with my parents for a while, and Mickey moved my belongings to our new place. Soon after, we found a nice home and started a peaceful life together. Angelina and father-in-law tried calling us every day, but we blocked them. Mickey later told me that Angelina's engagement was called off. Randolph had been so shocked by her behavior that he said, "I need to rethink marriage," and then cut all contact with her. Angelina screamed and cried, blaming Mickey, but he calmly replied, "Charlotte just told the truth." Father-in-law, now desperate without anyone to do the housework, asked Mickey, "Can you bring Charlotte back?" Mickey firmly replied, "I'm cutting ties with this house." A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. Mickey was overjoyed and decided to leave his demanding job for a less stressful one, saying, "I want to raise our child together with you. We haven't told the in-laws about the baby and don't plan to. Their attitudes wouldn't change, so there's no reason to involve them in our happiness." Now, with my belly growing, Mickey and I are looking forward to welcoming our child. We're living peacefully, enjoying each day together.
Hey there, I'm Isabella, a 28-year-old marketing exec living in the suburbs of Chicago. I'm sitting in my favorite coffee shop, trying to focus on work, when my phone buzzes. It's my sister, Margaret. "Ezzy, can you watch the kids tonight?" "I have a late meeting," she asks. I smile, already knowing my answer. "Of course, V, you know I love spending time with Ethan and Safia." Margaret's voice cracks a little. "Thanks, sis. I don't know what I'd do without you." As I hang up, I can't help but think about how much has changed since Margaret's divorce. She's been struggling, and I've been doing my best to be there for her and the kids. Later that evening, I'm at her place, helping Ethan with his math homework while Safia colors nearby. The doorbell rings, and my stomach drops when I hear familiar voices in the hallway. "Mom? Dad? What are you doing here?" Margaret asks, surprised. I cringe, already knowing this won't go well. Our parents, Robert and Linda, are well-off real estate developers, always with a sense of superiority. They favored Margaret for years, but since her divorce, they've been relentless. "We came to check on our grandchildren," Mom says, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I roll my eyes and prepare for what's coming. As they step into the living room, Dad's eyes narrow when he spots me. "Oh, Isabella, you're here too." "Yeah, just helping my sister," I reply, my voice laced with sarcasm. You know, being supportive. Mom ignores me, her focus solely on Margaret. Darling, we're worried about you. This divorce, it's not good for the children. Have you thought about reconciling with Mark? Margaret's face falls. Mom, we've been through this. The divorce is final. Mark and I aren't getting back together. Dad cuts in, his voice cold. You need to think about your reputation. The family's reputation. This divorce is a disgrace. I feel my blood boiling. Are you serious? Margaret's happiness doesn't matter. The fact that Mark was awful doesn't matter. Isabella, stay out of this. Mom snaps, blaring at me. This is why you're still single. No respect for family values. I bite my tongue, thinking about Jake, the amazing guy I've been dating for 6 months. If only they knew. As the argument escalates, I notice Ethan and Sophia looking scared. I kneel down beside them. Hey kiddos, how about we go get some ice cream? Their faces light up, and we sneak out the back door, leaving the chaos behind. As we walk to the ice cream parlor, I can't help but think about my own big news and how I'm going to break it to my family. Later that night, as I'm getting ready for bed, my phone pings. It's a text from Jake. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Love you. I smile, my hand instinctively moving to my stomach. I'm pregnant, and I'm terrified of how my family will react. But as I drift off to sleep, I promise myself and my baby that no matter what happens, we'll be just fine. The next evening, I sit at the dinner table, Jake's hand squeezing mine under the tablecloth. My parents, Robert and Linda, sit at the head of the table, looking as uptight as ever. I clear my throat. So I have some news. All eyes turn to me. Here goes nothing. Jake and I, we're having a baby. Jake beams beside me. We're so excited. He adds, giving my hand another squeeze. The silence that follows is deafening. Then all hell breaks loose. What did you just say? Mom shrieks, her face turning a dangerous shade of red. Dad slams his fist on the table, making the silverware rattle. Isabella, how could you be so irresponsible? Out of wedlock? Have you no shame? I feel my cheeks burn. It's the 21st century, Dad. Jake and I love each other. We're happy about this. Mom scoffs. Happy? You've disgraced this family. What will people say? Oh, so that's what this is about. I snap. Your precious reputation. Margaret tries to step in. Mom, Dad, please, can't we just? But Dad cuts her off. Don't you start, Margaret. We're not done with you either. A chill runs down my spine. What's that supposed to mean? Mom's face twists into a smug smile. Well, since you asked, we decided to sue for custody of Ethan and Sophia. The room goes silent. Margaret's face goes pale. What? She whispers. You heard us, Dad says, his tone cold. With your demanding job and this messy divorce, you're clearly an unfit mother. We're doing what's best for the children. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Are you kidding me? Margaret is an amazing mom. You can't do this. We can and we will, Mom says flatly. Unless what? I ask, dreading the answer. Dad leans forward. Unless you fix your little mistake, we'll forget this whole pregnancy nonsense if you do the right thing. I feel like I've been slapped. Fix my mistake? You mean get rid of my baby? Are you out of your minds? Jake stands abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. That's enough. Isabella, we're leaving. But I'm not done. I turn to Margaret. Sis, you can't let them do this. Fight them. Margaret just sits there, tears streaming down her face, saying nothing. Dad points to the door. Get out. You're no daughter of ours. Gladly, I spit back, grabbing my purse. As Jake and I head for the door, I turn back one last time. You know what? I feel sorry for you. You're so obsessed with appearances that you've forgotten what really matters. Family, love, happiness. You're the ones who should be ashamed. With that, we walk out, slamming the door behind us. Once we're in the car, the reality of what just happened crashes down on me, and I break down, sobbing uncontrollably. Jake pulls me into his arms. It's okay, Azzy. We've got each other. We've got our baby. That's all that matters. As we drive away from my childhood home, I realize he's right. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of a new chapter, and I'm ready to fight for it. It's been a whirlwind few months since that disastrous family dinner. Jake and I found a cozy little apartment, and let me tell you, Waking up next to him every morning makes all the drama worth it. Plus, this baby bump of mine is getting harder to ignore, in a good way. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Margaret's custody battle is in full swing, and it's really taking a toll on her. One afternoon, I stop by her place and find her surrounded by legal papers, looking like she hasn't slept in days. "Hey V, how are you holding up?" She looks up at me, dark circles under her eyes. "I'm hanging in there, barely." I plop down next to her on the couch. "Listen, I've been thinking. We need to fight fire with fire." "What do you mean?" she asks, confused. I take a deep breath. I hired a private investigator to look into Mom and Dad's business dealings. Margaret's eyes widen. "You did what?" "Hear me out," I say, leaning in. "The PI found some interesting stuff. Embezzlement, offshore accounts, property flipping schemes." As I fill her in on the details, Margaret's jaw drops lower with each revelation. "Holy, I can't believe it," she whispers. "Believe it, sis. Our dear parents aren't as squeaky clean as they pretend to be." Margaret shakes her head, still in shock. "But how does this help us?" I lean in closer, a plan forming in my mind. "Think about it. They're trying to paint you as an unfit mother. Well, how about we show the court who the real unfit guardians are?" A spark of hope flickers in Margaret's eyes. "You really think we can beat them?" "I know we can," I say confidently. "But V, you've got to be ready for a fight. No more sitting quietly while they steamroll over us. Are you with me?" For a moment, she hesitates. Then, straightening her shoulders, she nods. "I'm with you. For Ethan and Sophia. For all of us." We spend the next few hours plotting, our heads bent together over my laptop. As we work, I feel the baby kick, as if saying, "You've got this, Mom." That night, I drift off to sleep with my mind racing with plans and possibilities. Mom and Dad think they've got all the power, but they're in for one heck of a surprise. This mama bear is ready to roar, and I got the truth on my side. Maybe, just maybe, we'll save our family in the process, not the family they wanted us to be, but the family we choose to create. Strong, supportive, and real. The day of the custody hearing arrives, and I'm a bundle of nerves. My baby bump is now impossible to hide, and Jake has been my rock through it all. As we walk into the courthouse, I spot Margaret pacing nervously. "You ready for this?" I ask her. She nods, determination shining in her eyes. "Let's do this. For Ethan and Sophia." Inside the courtroom, the tension is thick. Mom and Dad sit there looking smug as ever. If only they knew what was coming. When it's my turn to testify, I take a deep breath and spill it all. "Your Honor," I say, my voice shaking but strong. "My parents aren't fit to raise a goldfish, let alone
I find myself entangled in a rather perplexing situation as I consider approaching your father regarding a troubling incident related to a potential mugging of my own father. Indeed, suspicions have arisen concerning your father's involvement in this alleged mugging. Currently, he is situated at home. Would you be open to allowing me a brief audience with him for an inquiry? The police officer displayed a momentary sense of bewilderment in response to my request, his expression betraying a subtle confusion. Despite this, he eventually agreed, stating, "Please, let me see him." Consequently, I led the police officer into the confines of my home, unlocking the door to reveal my father's presence. Upon beholding my father, the police officer was visibly taken aback by the unexpected revelation. This incident transpired a few months ago, and as I reflect upon it, I feel compelled to share a bit more about myself. My name is David, and I am currently a fourth-year university student. Despite my aspirations to work for a prominent company, there lingers an unresolved dilemma within me. The decision revolves around whether or not to inherit my father's company. You see, my father holds the esteemed position of president at a modest factory. During my formative years, I harbored a desire to follow in my father's footsteps, aspiring to become a president like him. However, as I entered my rebellious phase, I distanced myself from this ambition, feeling a sense of embarrassment towards my father perpetually adorned in work clothes stained with oil. This sentiment persisted through my teenage years, and to some extent, endures even now. As I matured into adulthood and engaged in part-time employment, my perspective on my father began to shift. I developed a newfound respect for his tireless work ethic, which sustained not only our family but also supported numerous employees and their families. Yet despite this growing admiration, an underlying sentiment lingered. A perception that the conventional salaryman, donned in a suit and toiling diligently, possessed a certain allure absent in my father's occupation. The narrative takes an intriguing turn when, during a shopping excursion with my father, we were unexpectedly hailed from behind. Turning together, my father and I encountered Richard, a contemporary of my father's from high school. Dressed in a suit and on an external sales trip, Richard hailed from a prestigious corporation. In the course of our conversation, Richard casually inquired if my father had indeed assumed control of the family business. This revelation prompted Richard to express disdain for what he referred to as the dirty little factory managed by my father, emphasizing the incredulity that a high school graduate could rise to the position of president. Stunned by Richard's derogatory remarks, I found myself grappling with the realization that the factory in question was initiated by my grandfather, making my father the second-generation custodian of this familial legacy. I had long been aware that he had assumed control after graduating from high school. However, the revelation of a classmate mocking him caught me off guard. Richard maintained a silent smile while addressing my father. "So, did you manage to expand your father's factory? You did mention during high school that you intended to take over the company and make it bigger." To this, my father admitted, "Unfortunately, I lacked the business acumen, and that dream didn't materialize. It seemed inevitable that I excelled in practical skills but lagged behind in intellectual pursuits. Nonetheless, I felt relieved that our family didn't face financial ruin." Richard chuckled heartily, playfully slapping my father on the shoulder. "Well, David, we'll catch up at the next reunion. I've got more work to do," he added before leaving. My father looked slightly uncomfortable, prompting me to redirect the conversation. Suggesting a change of topic, my father proposed that we continue shopping. At that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that my father's work had been belittled without any response from me. The internal debate about whether to take over my father's company or pursue a career at a prestigious corporation leaned decisively toward the latter. A few weeks later, fate intervened as my father's Alumni Association event took place at the bar where I worked part-time. Despite the bustling atmosphere, I managed to serve at the table hosting my father's gathering. Fulfilling my duties silently, I approached the room where the Alumni Association was held. My father warmly greeted me, introducing me as his son to those present. Though similar in appearance, I maintained a serious demeanor, responding awkwardly to the teasing of my father's inebriated classmates. Richard, seated nearby, noticed our interaction and remarked, "We met recently too, David, right? Are you planning to take over your father's small factory?" This question added another layer to my ongoing contemplation of my professional path. When I truthfully admitted to still contemplating my decision, an unpleasant alcoholic breath emanated from Richard, leaving me repulsed. Boisterously, he exclaimed, "Stop it. Your father's company is nothing extraordinary. David should consider working for a company like mine instead of inheriting such a lackluster business." Despite his inebriated state, Richard proceeded to boast about his professional achievements, narrating a career history that began as a mere assistant but now claimed the head of accounting position. A sense of unease crept over me as I sensed discrepancies in his narrative. I sensed that something was amiss, but I chose to keep my concerns to myself, wary of potential complications that might arise from challenging him. My father, on the other hand, seemed unfazed by Richard's inebriation, and, in fact, found the situation amusing. With a lighter mood due to his own inebriation, he asked Richard about changes in his department since their last encounter a few weeks ago. Questioning the sudden shift from sales to accounting, my father caught Richard off guard. Eventually, Richard admitted to an abrupt transfer, asserting that sales wasn't his forte. However, my father pointed out the incongruity in Richard's story, revealing that the company Richard proudly spoke of had actually been absorbed by a foreign corporation, with its accounting department relocated overseas. Laughter erupted among the party attendees as Richard, now embarrassed and regretful, attempted to save face but ultimately decided to leave the gathering with heavy footsteps. Witnessing my father's ability to address the uncomfortable truth that others had noticed but hesitated to mention, I found a sense of pride in his candor, even in his intoxicated state. As half a year passed since that incident, my internal dilemma regarding whether or not to take over my father's company only intensified. The confusion deepened with each passing day, leaving me uncertain about the path I should pursue. One day, while relaxing at home, the intercom interrupted my contemplation. In the absence of my mother, I answered the door to find a visitor in uniformed clothes identifying themselves as a police officer. Surprised and apprehensive, I responded with a stiff voice, wondering if I had inadvertently committed some transgression. The police officer then brought up a purse-snatching incident, expressing a need to inquire about the matter with my father. The mention of such an incident left me puzzled, and I began to wonder about the unfolding events that seemed to add further layers of complexity to my already tumultuous life. Indeed, the enigmatic cloud of suspicion had descended upon my father, casting a shadow over our tranquil abode. The air thick with uncertainty, I found myself face to face with a stern-faced police officer bearing the weight of an accusation that seemed inconceivable. Inquiring about my father's whereabouts, the officer, with an air of professionalism, sought confirmation of his presence within our home. The exchange took an unexpected turn as the officer, grappling with the perplexity in my tone, requested to lay eyes upon my father. Navigating the corridors of my dwelling, I ushered the law enforcement representative into the sacred space of our familial sanctuary, a room adorned with a Buddhist altar and a photograph capturing the essence of my late father's spirit. In the ensuing revelation, I divulged the heartbreaking truth to the officer that my father had met an untimely demise in a tragic traffic accident. The officer, displaying empathy amid the unfolding tragedy, extended condolences for the loss. Yet my quest for justice and clarity persisted, and I sought to discern the source of this bewildering accusation that had stained my father's reputation. However, the officer, bound by the constraints of confidentiality, refrained from divulging the identity of the accuser. Apologies flowed from the lips of the officer as he departed, leaving me grappling with an unsettling sense of confusion and the nagging question of who had leveled such a grave accusation against my departed father. Days unfolded like the pages of a mystery novel, each chapter bringing a new layer of complexity to the narrative, as I took on the responsibilities left in the void by my father's absence. Immersed in the daily operations of my father's factory, I witnessed my mother's valiant attempts to fill the void left by his absence. However, the weight of age limited her contributions. Amidst the mechanical symphony of the factory floor, the harmony was shattered by the sudden intrusion of Richard, a character bearing an air of accusation and vengeance. His booming voice reverberated through the cacophony, demanding restitution for a perceived transgression committed by my father. Caught in the crossfire of accusations, I attempted to reason with Richard, asserting my father's innocence in the face of the alleged purse-snatching incident. The atmosphere within the factory shifted, with the ceaseless hum of machinery giving way to hushed whispers and curious glances exchanged among the employees. Richard, however, remained resolute in his pursuit of justice, convinced of my father's guilt. His insistence echoed through the industrial expanse, causing a disturbance that transcended the confines of the factory. Frustration surged within me as I defended my father's honor, challenging Richard's assertions and questioning the veracity of his claims. As the confrontation unfolded, Richard revealed the purported timeline of the incident, fixing it 2 weeks prior. A murmur rippled through the gathered employees, their confusion palpable. My persistent queries regarding the accuracy of the timeline only fueled Richard's frustration, intensifying his vocal protestations. In the midst of the tumult, Richard's disparaging remarks about my father's workplace and colleagues added fuel to the emotional fire. Yet the gravest affront was his attempt to pin the blame for the alleged purse-snatching squarely on my deceased father's shoulders. My chest tightened with a mix of anger and sorrow as Richard persisted in his accusations, seemingly oblivious to the irrefutable truth, illuminating the fact that my father, the subject of this tumultuous ordeal, had met his end in a tragic traffic accident a month prior. The realization hung heavy in the air, a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the injustice faced even in death. Richard appeared as though he had ingested an entire pigeonhole, and with an amused expression he muttered, "Ha!" Undeterred, I pressed on, questioning the incredulous accusation he had just hurled in my father's direction. How could my father snatch purses when he passed away just 1 month ago? Perhaps there wasn't any purse snatching at all, I asserted. However, my skepticism wasn't merely based on the recent events. It was rooted in the knowledge I had gained during our class reunion. It came to light that Richard, since his school days, had been a habitual liar. This revelation occurred during the reunion, where I discovered that his dishonesty had deep roots. Moreover, it turned out that Richard had harbored a long-standing jealousy toward my father, dating back to their school days. This envy sprouted from a romantic rivalry. The girl Richard liked had chosen my father over him. This petty jealousy had fueled an unnecessary rivalry, leaving me unable to forgive Richard for attempting to tarnish my deceased father's reputation with baseless accusations. As Richard persistently asserted his unfounded claims, an interjection from another direction pierced the air. Someone emphatically shouted, "Your president wouldn't do something like that." Our president is a serious person who walks around with honesty, teaching technology, and encouraging independence. He always considers the well-being of the staff and business partners, prioritizing that over profits. The voices praising my father began to multiply, and I felt a mix of emotions, including shame for once thinking my father's work was embarrassing. Amidst the rising tide of support for my father, Richard, trembling and tearful, found himself on the receiving end of an unexpected defense of my father's character by the factory workers. It was a poignant moment that revealed my father's true standing among his peers. In the aftermath, I dealt the decisive blow to Richard by pledging to consult with the police over his false accusations against my father. Overwhelmed and unable to counter the mounting evidence, Richard raised his voice and fled the factory. True to my word, I reported Richard's false accusations to the police, supported by a recording of his statements made by a thoughtful staff member during the heated confrontation. The presence of irrefutable evidence expedited the legal process, leading to Richard's swift apprehension. His attempt to frame my father backfired, transforming his lie into a crime for which he paid a penance in jail. The relief. One day at the hospital where I am employed, I unexpectedly crossed paths with Jessica, a friend of my mom. With a surprised tone, she questioned my presence, stating that I seemed completely out of place. She warned me that if I came seeking a job, I wouldn't find one, instructing me to go back home. Jessica's unexpected comment left the surrounding doctors in a state of frozen uncertainty. I couldn't fathom what she was implying, hoping it wouldn't escalate into a serious matter that might already be too late to rectify. It appeared Jessica hadn't grasped that making an enemy out of me wasn't wise. However, silence was no longer an option. Addressing Jessica directly, I couldn't help but wonder if she was fearless or simply clueless. With a perplexed look, as if she didn't comprehend the meaning at all, she responded, "Ha. What are you talking about? Let me introduce myself. I am Emily, a 35-year-old mother with an active 7-year-old daughter and a mischievous 1-year-old son. My husband, John, is 2 years younger than me and works diligently as a nurse at the General Hospital, caring for patients. I had a job too, but after the birth of our second son, I am currently enjoying maternity leave. Our family recently moved from a cramped 2-bedroom apartment to a second-hand house, bought with a loan. Despite its age, the house has a charming appeal, with a spacious garden for the kids and a soothing view from the rooftop balcony. There's also a lush park nearby where our family spends weekends, turning it into our weekend paradise. The story of Jessica and me began when our daughters, of the same age, started playing together in the park. Jessica, a surgeon at the same hospital where John works, wore designer clothes, and her daughter followed suit in renowned brands. Excited by the coincidence, she expressed a desire to meet my husband, leading to a planned tea gathering at our house. However, upon Jessica's arrival, she displayed blatant rudeness, appraising our belongings and questioning the history of our house. Her impertinent remarks continued during tea, questioning John's choice of being a nurse and suggesting financial instability. Each word cut deep, leaving us at a loss for words. After she left, I apologized sincerely to John for the uncomfortable experience. Concerned, I contemplated keeping some distance from Jessica in the future. John reassured me with a warm smile, suggesting that while it's good to make connections with neighborhood moms, it might be best not to get too involved with Jessica. As time passed, our family experienced new changes. After giving birth to our second son and celebrating his first birthday, I contemplated returning to work. With John's parents providing support with the kids, I found myself with some spare time at the hospital where my husband works, enjoying a hot coffee at the hospital cafe. I'd heard a familiar voice from behind. It was Jessica. "Oh my, isn't that Emily? It's been such a long time." "Hello, Jessica. How have you been?" "Good. What brings you here today? Are you here to see John?" I inquired. "Yes, just some errands. Maybe a job interview or something. It must be tough on just John's income, right?" Her words dripped with sarcasm, and she grinned smugly. Wanting to avoid a troublesome conversation, I responded lightly, "Well, something like that." However, Jessica continued probing with a searching gaze. "This hospital has various stores, right? So where are you working part-time? At the convenience store? Or maybe the restaurant?" After a brief silence, I curtly replied, "Sorry, it's about time for my appointment." I left the cave quickly, moving swiftly through the hospital. I took the elevator to the top floor, heading to the director's office for an important job consultation. After about an hour of discussion, I made my way to the large auditorium of the university for my next appointment. There was an important announcement from the director scheduled that afternoon, with all the hospital staff gathered. On the way to the auditorium, I ran into John. "Oh, John, that's great. After the director's talk, let's go for lunch together," I suggested. "Sounds good. It's a bit of a walk, but how about pasta?" he offered with a smile. "The pasta place behind the hospital sounds good. I haven't been there in a long time. I'm actually looking forward to it." I agree happily. Lunch with my husband at the hospital was a rare treat. In the hallway to the auditorium, I ran into several doctors, engaging in brief conversations while exchanging greetings. John moved ahead quickly, and I followed at a leisurely pace toward the passageway leading to the auditorium. Along the way, I happened to meet some colleague doctors. "Emily, it's really been a while, and I heard you had a child. Congratulations from the bottom of my heart." Warm words of congratulations were exchanged. Another doctor joined in, Emily, you were such a big help here. We've been in quite a stir since you left, he said with a laugh, hinting at the struggles. Then, another one asked with interest, is your return imminent? Despite such inquiries, the reunion was comforting, filled with nostalgia and relief to see my colleagues well. But the atmosphere quickly changed. Jessica suddenly appeared and asked curiously, Emily, why are you here? Are you heading to the auditorium by any chance? Yes, that's right. I have some business. I responded modestly yet clearly due to the presence of several colleagues. But Jessica's questions only grew. But the gathering is only for doctors and nurses, right? Why would a part-timer be here? She asked, not hiding her skepticism. Her remark brought silence to the corridor, a silence that seemed indicative. A part-time lady like her? A doctor muttered. Is she okay, I wonder? Another doctor murmured worriedly, not wanting to be involved in unnecessary commotion. I tried to weather Jessica's words. However, it seemed to only incite Jessica. Why are you ignoring me? It's like you don't think at all, Jessica exclaimed with a sneer. Lost your way? The auditorium isn't this way. If you're looking for part-time work, go the other direction. Now please leave, she commanded, looking down on me. The doctors present were appalled by Jessica's behavior, but sympathetically, they began to stand by me, attempting to defuse the situation. The surrounding doctors raised their voices in unison against Jessica. Disappointment and anger were evident on their faces, and their voices contained a strong sense of rejection toward Jessica's actions. Hold on, you! What kind of way is that to speak to Emily? Don't you have any manners? Apologize to her right now, they demanded, not just disapproving but reproaching Jessica's conduct. The doctors gathered, looking tense, and confronted Jessica, the atmosphere charged with tension. Jessica, faced with a united front against her, appeared confused and at a loss for words. What's going on? I just pointed out that she doesn't belong here. The meeting is only for relevant personnel, and she doesn't fit the bill, right? She tried to justify her stance, but my patience had reached its limit. With a composed tone, but with content sharp as a blade, I addressed Jessica. Jessica, you really are brave, aren't you? Or is it that you simply can't read the room? I critiqued calmly. Unable to find a rebuttal, she stared back at me, perplexed. What'd you just say? I calmly made my position clear. You'll understand soon enough. The actions you took against me and your careless remarks, the serious consequences they could bring. The doctors present showed no sympathy for Jessica. Look, your future is now utterly uncertain, they said cuttingly. You might want to start looking for another job while you still can. They nodded earnestly to each other. Clearly cornered, Jessica was still unable to hide her panic and anger. So why on earth are all of you defending this non-regular employee so much? I don't understand why you rate her so highly, she raised her voice. The conversation among the doctors echoed in the hallway. Are you the new surgical specialist? One doctor inquired. So that's why you don't know Emily? That's quite pitiful, while another added, Jessica, with anger on her face and indignation in her tone, retorted, Can you explain what you mean by that? Her anger stemmed from the belief that judging people by their professional standing, regardless of their duties as a doctor, was against human dignity. The fact that someone with such values was in our workplace was deeply shocking to me, and I couldn't help but feel distrustful. Jessica seemed unaware, but in fact, I was the very person she should respect the most. The other doctors completely ignored Jessica's questions and left her with cold stares, quietly leaving the scene. Then, I stated calmly, Well, Jessica, we can talk more about this later. You may find my husband's position as a nurse pitiable, but no matter how hard you try, you can never be like John. Besides, the fact that you find meaning in competing shows a great misunderstanding on your part. Jessica became flustered. Wait a minute. Who on earth are you? You're not just a part-timer, are you? She raised her voice. I smiled secretly and replied, As I've already said, you'll come to understand shortly. And with that, I hurried off toward the auditorium. As I entered the auditorium, a large number of doctors had already gathered, and the director stood in front of the screen. Thank you all for gathering here during your busy schedules. Today, I would like to discuss the future direction of our hospital. He began and then proceeded to make an important announcement. Seeing John in the crowd, he approached me and whispered, "Emily, good timing. I happened to overhear a bit earlier. Was there some trouble with Jessica?" "Yes, she did point out something minor, but it's not a big deal," I replied. "Interestingly, it seems she has misunderstood me for a part-time worker at this hospital," I replied. John looked incredulous and responded, "No way, Emily, as a part-timer?" We couldn't help but suppress our laughter at the absurdity of the situation. Amidst this, the director concluded the explanation of the annual business plan and moved on to a significant personnel announcement. As you all know, our hospital is well-staffed with an adequate number of doctors and nurses. To further improve the quality of our medical services, we plan to actively implement overseas training programs. The first training is scheduled in 2 months, and we will select 5 doctors and 5 nurses for it, he declared. This announcement was met with cheers from the attending doctors, and everyone was excited about the prospect. Overseas training meant an excellent opportunity to learn about the latest medical practices in the world. Since it was the hospital's first initiative of its kind since its establishment, everyone's eyes sparkled with the news. The director continued solemnly, yet with an undertone of expectation. "Now let's proceed with announcing the names of the rest who have been selected." As he spoke, a silence of mixed tension and anticipation fell, and the names of the chosen 10 were called out one by one. Although John's name was not called this time, his expression did not show disappointment. He quietly watched with a sense of celebration as each selected individual stepped forward. Addressing the 10 lined up on stage, the director asked, "Are all of you ready in spirit for the training? Please share a word about your enthusiasm and determination." He gently encouraged them. Each gave a brief, resolute speech, reaffirming their strong intentions. After everyone had spoken, it was finally Jessica's turn. With proper decorum, yet confidently, she said, "I am truly grateful for this valuable opportunity for training. I aim to contribute to the further progress of our hospital with the cutting-edge medical techniques I will learn abroad," she said with a polished greeting. Afterward, she turned slowly towards where we were seated and continued with her unique assertive tone. "However, this hospital has inexperienced nurses who continue to fail the national exam and impudent individuals who attempt to attend medical conferences despite being non-regular staff. I intend to improve and transform all these aspects." Jessica's provocative declaration changed the atmosphere of the venue, and the looks directed at her turned icy. Her words highlighted the hospital's tensions and how dangerous youthful overconfidence can be, especially the director's sharp gaze seemed to freeze the room, adding significant weight to the situation. The director, maintaining his composure, asked, "Jessica, that was about those 2 sitting there, wasn't it?" His smile was calm yet did not reach his eyes. "You said there were unsuitable people mingled in here, right?" Confidently nodding, she answered, "Yes, exactly. There are those unfit for this noble assembly," she answered with conviction, remaining composed. The director responded, "Street Emily, could you come forward, please?" With this unexpected invitation, I, who had been merely an observer, suddenly found myself at the center of attention. Confused and starting to lose her confidence, Jessica questioned, "Why? Why are you calling her name?" She struggled to grasp the situation, and the director, showing disappointment towards Jessica, said with a quiet voice, "Jessica, I am disappointed in you. Emily, please introduce yourself to everyone." Taking a deep breath, I recounted the beginning of my career, important milestones, and my temporary step back to become a mother. I continued, "Hello, everyone. It's been a while. I am Emily, the chief of the medical department. I apologize for any inconvenience my maternity leave may have caused, but I will be resuming my duties next month. I look forward to working with you all again." Jessica's voice couldn't hide her surprise. Wait, she's the chief of the medical department? Her eyes searched the room for confirmation. Indeed, as the head of the medical team, I had taken a 2-year parental leave to birth and raise my first son. The director, affirming the truth, added quietly, "By the way, Emily is my daughter." His words resonated in the room with undeniable clarity, defining the reality of the situation. Jessica's expression went from confusion to shock, her mouth agape as if to object to the reality, but no words came out. The room, filled with hospital staff, could not contain its reaction, and suppressed laughter spilled out at the unexpected turn of events. The director began speaking in a relaxed tone. "Jessica, for this upcoming overseas training, you have been assigned to be the team leader. Your deployment will be in a conflict zone in the Middle East. There is a shortage of both medication and medical equipment, and a very challenging situation is anticipated. It will be interesting to see if your abilities will be fully utilized, but don't worry, Emily will be there to support you. Learn as much as you can under her guidance." Proudly, Jessica responded with dignity, "I am a doctor too. Although I have no experience working abroad, my clinical skills and treatment records are first class. I will not allow myself to be underestimated." I replied to Jessica with a calm but firm voice. "Let me make one thing clear, Jessica. In the near future, I am going to take over the directorship of this hospital from my father. Do you understand the weight of this fact?" Jessica's expression stiffened, and seeing this, I continued, "Yes, it seems you understand. Well, depending on my decision, your future in this hospital may be affected." Jessica could no longer hide her agitation, and I calmly added, "I haven't heard such a thing." Jan intervened, calmly adding his words, "Jessica, we had not informed you about that matter beforehand. Your disrespectful attitude towards Emily may well be something you deeply regret in the future." Towards the end of the meeting, the director stated firmly, "Please, everyone, a bit of silence. Jessica, in the discussions here, in the end, results are everything. No matter how excellent you may be, that is just one aspect. What's important is the results you can achieve in this hospital, and on that front, I have great expectations of you." Jessica fell silent at the director's words, bowed her head, and nodded without saying anything. The director concluded with that, today's meeting is adjourned." As his words ended, everyone in the auditorium stood up and returned to their respective places. Stepping out of the director's office leisurely, I casually said, "Shall we go for lunch? I've got a craving for pasta today." Side by side with John, I started walking towards our favorite pasta place in the backyard, leaving the hospital building behind. As we were about to pass the small smoking area set up behind the hospital, I spotted Jessica, who appeared to be deep in thought. Well, it appears that our less educated daughter-in-law, the unremarkable plain Jane, is about to grace us with her singing. Come on, step onto the stage, you ugly duckling, my mother-in-law sneered. It was my sister-in-law's wedding reception, and I was coerced into performing a solo, as was customary whenever my mother-in-law found an opportunity to belittle me. Her audacity to humiliate me, even on such a joyous occasion as my sister-in-law's wedding, was beyond my comprehension. What's taking so long? Hurried up? She seemed impatient. Her voice hardened. Okay then, I will. Excuse me. I stood up from my seat and slowly made my way towards the stage. I'm Erica, 33 years old, living with my 4-year-old daughter Janice and my husband Paul, who's the same age as me. We're in our 8th year of marriage. Orphaned as a child, I was raised by my grandparents but chose to be independent, dropping out of high school to work at a local factory. Paul and I reconnected at a high school reunion when we were 21, hit it off, and started dating. 3 years after Paul graduated from university, we got married. Since then, I've been supporting him, managing our household chores, and raising our daughter while working part-time. Mom, teach me how to sing, Janice has been asking me recently. Neither Paul nor I had any intention of forcing music onto her, but I have a background in music, having been the president of the choir club in high school. I still love singing and even take voice training lessons as a hobby. Janice developed an interest in music naturally, and I hope that one day we can perform together with Paul's music. Returning home 3 days later, my mother-in-law called, resuming her habit of belittling me since she discovered I dropped out of high school. She often showered me with insults, criticizing my abilities and family background. She wasn't my favorite person. Hello, is Janice there right now? My mother-in-law asked. I'm sorry, she's at voice training right now. She's not home, I replied, realizing I had let something slip, but it was too late. Why didn't you tell me before letting her attend such things? You really don't think things through. I'll teach her, my mother-in-law insisted. Despite her accomplished musical background, she tended to take a condescending tone when it came to music and education. She doted on our daughter but might inadvertently push her away if she followed the same strict teaching approach she used on Paul and his sister in the past. Mother-in-law, I appreciate your offer, but I want Janice to have her freedom in this. Even if you say that, it's really up to Janice whether she wants to continue or not. I can't force her to quit. I'm sure it would be much better if I taught her. My mother-in-law abruptly ended the call. 3 months passed, and I'd almost forgotten about the incident when my mother-in-law decided to visit our home. It's been a while, hasn't it? Oh, how's Janice been doing? She inquired, likely happy to see her granddaughter after such a long time. As soon as she stepped into our home, she immediately scooped Janice into her arms, barely greeting us. It just so happened that Janice had the day off from her voice training class, and the whole family was at home. Granny, I've become good at singing, Janice exclaimed, boasting to her grandmother. Really? Could you sing something for me then? My mother-in-law asked. I intervened, worried about what my mother-in-law might say to Janice. How about we eat first before we hear her sing? It's lunchtime after all, I suggested. Don't interrupt when she's about to sing for me. My mother-in-law dismissed my suggestion. I'm sorry, Janice dear. Can you sing for me? My mother-in-law asked. Hearing her request, Janice began to sing. From the perspective of a mother-in-law who graduated as the valedictorian of a music conservatory, my daughter's singing must have sounded rather clumsy. I had a sinking feeling inside me, worried that my daughter might receive some snide remarks from her. However, my mother-in-law applauded and praised my daughter, saying, "You did well. You've practiced a lot." Far from making any sarcastic comments, she thanked her grandmother, seeming happy to be praised. I sighed in relief, thinking that even my strict mother-in-law wouldn't make snide remarks to her granddaughter. I thought Mom might say something. I was a little worried. Paul whispered to me with a look of relief on his face. Nothing particular happened after that. But as the evening came, I realized that Janice had fallen asleep. "Excuse me, mother-in-law. Since Janice fell asleep, I'm going to take her to her room," I announced, picking up Janice and carrying her to her bedroom. After putting my daughter to bed, I returned to the living room. As soon as I re-entered, my mother-in-law said to me, "Didn't you think that Janice's singing today was terrible, Erica? It's a waste of money to let her go to a class that can only teach her to that level. I'll teach her myself." I confronted Paul as anger welled up within me. Wait a minute, isn't that a bit too selfish? What can we do when it comes to music? She's much better than me, and it's a fact that I got better by being taught by her, Paul reasoned. About 5 minutes of silence followed, and it was Paul who gave in and said, "All right, Mom, go ahead and teach Janice to sing for a while." Hearing those unbelievable words from Paul's mouth, my mind went blank. Is this some kind of joke? Won't they care how Janice feels? After all, she has been so happy to be interested in music. What if Janice hates music because she's taught so strictly by her grandmother? I was so angry that I felt like waking up Janice right at that moment and leaving the house with her. So I guess it means Janice is quitting the voice training class, as I said, right? My mother-in-law, with a triumphant look on her face, asked Paul and me. All right, but remember, this is not a music conservatory, so please absolutely do not do anything that Janice would dislike. I know that you know I'm not uneducated like you, I retorted, stating what I had to say, knowing she'd never back off, and I let her go home for the day. That night, my husband apologized for his mother's behavior, but I did not even want to see his face. I ignored him and went to bed. The next morning, I told my daughter Janice, "From today, instead of going to the voice training class, let's have Grandma teach you to sing here at home, all right?" When she heard it, she looked very sad but said nothing and just nodded. I apologized, seeing her like that. Then, come noon, my mother-in-law arrived at our home. "Janice, starting today, Grandma is going to teach you to sing even better," she said to my daughter with a smile. No sooner had the lesson started than my mother-in-law's teaching style became more and more strict. Within an hour, she criticized Janice harshly, demanding perfection. "You're wrong. You're making the same mistake in the same place. Do it again." I knew it would turn out like this. "Mother-in-law, this isn't what we agreed to, is it? Could you be a bit gentler?" "What are you talking about? I'm being gentle. Don't interfere. Why don't you quietly do some housework that you can hardly handle?" 4 hours passed, and at last, my mother-in-law's lesson ended. "Well, see you tomorrow. Remember to practice what we did today," she left, seemingly pleased with herself. If I'm going to get yelled at this much, I don't want to sing anymore, seated in her chair, Janice said to me. I harbored an intense hatred for my mother-in-law, taking away what my daughter enjoyed and only caring about her own satisfaction. This cannot go on. I won't let my mother-in-law have her way. Her singing lessons continued in the days that followed. However, after about a week, Janice told me, "I don't want Grandma to teach me anymore. I don't want to sing." Given my mother-in-law's way of teaching, I thought it couldn't be helped. You don't have to force yourself. If you want to quit, that's okay too. So you don't want to go back to the voice training class. It was something she had started because she wanted to, and I, for my part, wanted her to continue. So I asked her that. If it's that class, it seemed that Janice hadn't come to hate singing itself. It appeared that the harsh words from her grandmother and the lack of praise, even when she felt she did well, were making it unenjoyable for her. Why don't you go back to your voice training lessons and give it another shot? I asked Janice, and as if she hadn't been upset moments before, she perked up and nodded enthusiastically. So I'm sorry to say this to you, grandmother, but from tomorrow, Janice will be returning to her original voice training classes. The next day arrived. I relayed Janice's feelings to her grandmother over the phone. How can she whine about giving up after just a week? Isn't it your fault for raising such a weak-minded child? My mother-in-law exclaimed. I retorted, well, it might be, but even though you graduated top of your class from a prestigious music college, It seems that's the only way you know how to teach. Janice told me that she preferred her voice training teacher. Fussing and fuming, my mother-in-law continued, but I ignored her and hung up. Whether she was top of her class or not, it was quite satisfying that her own teaching method had led to her being disliked by her granddaughter, who preferred her voice training teacher. After that, the visits from the grandmother ceased. I spoken to your mother and told her it was okay if she didn't come to teach anymore. Janice said she didn't want it anymore either. I also feel like I've done something unforgivable to Janice. Back in the day, my mother was very strict with me about music, so I couldn't say anything. But I thought she wouldn't be so harsh on her granddaughter. I'm really sorry, I confessed to my husband Paul that night. When I relayed this to him, he seemed deeply regretful and apologized. I was so angry when Paul suggested quitting Janice's voice training class and having the grandmother teach her. I almost felt like punching him, but fortunately, Janice didn't come to hate music, so I decided to forgive him. 2 weeks later, Paul said, "My sister is getting married in a month, and she asks us to perform. I had never performed at someone else's wedding before. What kind of performance is she expecting?" I was planning to bring a few people from my band and do a small concert, but my sister really wants you and my mother to sing as well. Hearing that the grandmother would also be performing, I reluctantly accepted Paul's suggestion. "So, does that mean I'll be singing with your mother?" "Well, yeah, that's how it seems." Singing with my mother-in-law of all people, I wondered if it would be all right. But if I happened to sing better than her at this performance, I wondered what she'll say. I started practicing the very next day, but there was no sign of my mother-in-law practicing at all. "Mother, aren't you going to practice?" "I'm fine. I'm much better than you, even without practicing. After all, practice is something that people like you, who are not very good, need to do." I tried asking because I was curious, but the only response from my mother-in-law was sarcasm. I decided it was a waste of time to engage with her and focused on my own preparations. After we decided what song to perform, I also increased the frequency of my voice training lessons. I was sick of being ridiculed by my mother-in-law, and above all, I was anxious about performing in public after such a long time without proper training. On the day of my sister-in-law's wedding, the ceremony went smoothly, and the time for the entertainment had finally come. First, my husband Paul took the stage and began to play his music. As expected, given he plays regularly, he was confident and exuded an elegant aura. I was utterly mesmerized by Paul's performance. "I'm not feeling well today. Could you sing on your own?" Then, out of the blue, my mother-in-law told me to sing solo. "What? That's so sudden. It's not fair." "Well, there's nothing we can do about it." "Or what? Are you too embarrassed to
Just leave. Go away. The person yelled angrily. Stand still outside, you silly, useless old lady. I'm feeling really cold. Can you please open the door? The next morning, my son's wife was found outside, feeling very cold. My name is Lucy. I'm 60 years old and I take care of the house. My husband died a few years ago. Now my son Tom, his wife Mary, and my grandson Alan live with me. We came together after my husband passed away, but I tried to give them space so I wouldn't bother them. They thought it would be too much if we were too close all the time, so they made changes to the house for more privacy. Mary is friendly and likes to spend time with her friends. Maybe it was better for us to not see each other often. Alan, my grandson, is in 4th grade. Sometimes I look after him when Mary goes out. He's really cute. Tom works at night, so we don't see each other much. He and Mary never argued, and they went out together sometimes. So I thought everything was fine with their marriage. Mary has lots of friends and throws parties at our house often. She stays close with her mom friends from Alex's school, and they all come over on Fridays for a party. These parties bothered me a lot. They started in the evening and went late into the night with loud noise and people drinking. Sometimes the husbands of Mary's friends would get drunk too. They didn't care if Alan got tired or hungry, so he'd often come to my room when he was bored. Once someone got hurt and an ambulance had to come because they fell into broken glass. Another time, a fight got so bad that they almost called the police. It was always me who had to calm Alan down and say sorry to the neighbors the next day for the trouble. Mary liked having these parties and didn't want them to stop. I thought about talking to Tom about it, but since he worked at night on Fridays, he never saw what was happening, and I didn't feel comfortable bringing it up with him. I once told Mary how worried I was about Alan. I'm concerned about all the chaos on Fridays. I don't want any emergencies. It's not good for Alan. I'll take care of him on Fridays, so why don't you all go out to a restaurant and drink responsibly? Living together stresses me out more than you realize. Wouldn't you feel the same if you were me? Also, going out to drink costs more money than doing it at home. I can't tell your friends they can't come here. You don't understand how I feel. She got really mad and wouldn't talk to anyone. Then one Friday, Alan came home from school feeling tired. He had a fever of 100 degrees when I checked. Of all days, it's Friday. Everyone will be here soon. Why don't you go to your room and rest so you don't bother us? Can't we just cancel for today? I didn't say everything I wanted to. I can take care of Alan today, Mary. Is that okay? I offered, but she declined, probably sensing my frustration. It's fine, she replied. You don't need to worry. We're not that noisy. Why does it always fall on moms when a kid gets sick? I didn't mean to blame her, but I had to say something. If you start feeling worse, come to my room, I told Alan. I have some TV shows we can watch tonight. I'll be up late. Thanks, Grandma, he said. I'll be okay. I started to feel a bit calmer, but it was still a big day. The noise from their gathering was loud even from my room. Then there was a soft knock on my door. My heart raced with worry about Alan. I hurried to open the door, and there he was, looking upset. Can I stay with you tonight? He asked, tears in his eyes. I can't sleep because my head hurts. Even when I cover my ears, it's still so noisy. I quickly brought him into the room and gave him a drink, which he drank in one go, probably because he was thirsty. His hands felt really warm. So I checked his temperature, and it had gone up to 102. I was furious for the first time in a while. But I held back because taking care of Alan was more important than arguing with Mary. Alan still had a fever the next morning and looked just as sick. Alan looks really sick, so I think we should take him to the hospital this morning, I suggested, because most hospitals only see patients in the morning on Saturdays. But Mary couldn't get out of bed, probably because she had been up late drinking the night before. Don't worry, it'll get better soon. You'll be fine, right? She said, still half asleep and not even looking up from her bed. Alan replied, but it was clear he wasn't okay. He's had asthma since he was little, so he's more likely to have asthma attacks when he's sick. As I watched him, worried he might have an attack, he started to wheeze, just like I had feared. Mary, I think Alan's having an asthma attack. Where's his medicine? I asked, but Mary was fast asleep and didn't respond. Okay, I'm taking him to the emergency room, all right? I repeated several times before I took Alan to the hospital. Thankfully, they were able to give him inhalation and medication, and I felt a huge relief seeing Alan feeling better. When Mary woke up that evening, she exploded. "Don't be selfish. He didn't need to go to the hospital. How much did going to the emergency room cost you? I can't believe it. I tried to talk to you so many times, but you were too drunk to wake up. Can't you just stop drinking when Alan is sick? He was in a lot of pain. Fever is normal for kids, and it's already gone, so it wasn't a big deal. Asthma flare-ups happen too. Don't spoil him just because he's your grandson." I thought I should tell Tom about it, so I did, but he said, "But Alan is okay now, right? Don't worry too much about a kid's cold. Mary's dealing with a lot of stress from our living situation, so please try to be patient with her. It's important for you to take a step back since you all live together." I got the message loud and clear, but I didn't have much to say in response to his comments about the stress of living together. Tom was at work one day towards the end of the year when he suddenly needed surgery. He ended up spending a week in the hospital, including over the holidays. I'm thinking about spending this New Year's holiday at my parents' house for the first time in a while, Mary mentioned one day. Usually, our family spent New Year's cleaning up, enjoying our favorite foods, and going out to eat with my eldest daughter Emily and her family, who live nearby. I knew there was some distance between Mary and her parents, so I wondered what had changed. But if she could feel refreshed at her parents' place, that would be great for me. And I knew it would make Alan happy to spend time with his loving relatives. That sounds wonderful. Are you going to bring Alan with you? I'm sure your parents would be thrilled to see him. I'll bring him along while I'm there. Can you keep an eye on Tom? Of course. Aside from checking on Tom, I'll be spending New Year's alone this year. If you're going to be alone for the holidays, why don't you come to our house this year? Emily suggested. So I decided to accept her invitation. On New Year's Eve, both Mary and I were supposed to leave the house. I found myself sweating as I cleaned that day. Maybe it was because I was getting older, but cleaning felt like a task I had been avoiding for too long. Mary was out in the morning doing some shopping, so I tried to do as much cleaning as I could by myself. When Mary returned from shopping, she seemed a bit restless, fiddling with her watch. "Lucy, when are you planning to leave?" she asked. "Aren't you done yet?" "Well, I'm not sure. I haven't really set a time. I've done quite a bit, but I might not finish everything now. What about you? When are you planning to leave?" "If you go first, I'll make sure all the doors are locked and everything before I leave." I was sweating a lot from all the cleaning and had only thin clothes on. So when I got thrown out into the yard, I felt really cold and shivery, especially with the snow falling. "Mary, let me back in. I haven't had a chance to change my clothes. I'm freezing out here. Why are you taking so long? Just go already." My coat had been thrown out with my belongings, so I put it over my sweaty t-shirt for some extra warmth. I couldn't get back into the house because both the front door and the kitchen door were locked. I called out to Mary for a while, but she didn't answer, so I gave up. With no other choice, I decided to take a train to Emily's house. When I arrived, Emily was surprised to see me in such light clothes. "What's wrong? Why are you dressed like that?" she asked with concern. "Come inside quickly. You'll catch a cold. Have you seen Bob? He was worried about you because of the snow, so he went to pick you up. He said he texted you." It was only then that I realized I had left my phone at home. Emily's son, Bob, is a college student, and I felt bad because he had driven all the way there to pick me up, and we missed each other. Emily texted Bob to let him know that I had arrived by train. That's when Bob shared something shocking with us. "I tried calling you several times, but you never answered. Then I heard a phone ringing from inside the house. I thought you might be sick, so I went in. Strangely, the front door was unlocked. I found your phone in the living room, but when I heard noises from upstairs, I got worried and went to check it out." "It makes sense for Bob to be concerned, especially with the unlocked door," I commented. "Then I saw Mary and some man I didn't know hovering in the bedroom," Bob added. "What? But Mary was supposed to be at her parents' house with Alan," I exclaimed, surprised by the unexpected revelation. I was stunned and stood still for a moment. Suddenly, they leaped off the balcony and disappeared into the yard, covered in a comforter. I ran after them and searched the yard, but they were gone. "They had escaped. You let them get away?" Emily asked incredulously. "I don't think they got hurt. There were bushes and snow on the ground," I explained. I locked the second-floor door and was about to leave when I heard a noise from the next room and found Alan. Alan was small enough to hide behind Bob, Emily remarked. I'm sorry, my mom told me not to leave my room until after the new year. Alan was in his room surrounded by snacks and juice. I brought Alan here because I thought he'd have more fun and be more comfortable, Mary explained. I made sure to lock the front door. The spare key is under the flower pot. I'm glad nothing has changed since I was a kid. You did a good job of locking the door, Mom. It's time to talk to Tom about the future. Let's play some games, Alan. The two happily left the room. I'm not interested in Mary's affair right now. They can work it out on their own, but I can't forget what she did to Alan, I muttered. We spent the night relaxing with Emily and the others because it was already late. The next morning, Emily, Bob, and I returned home. We decided to leave Alan with Emily's husband. When we arrived home, we saw Mary standing at the front door. She was barefoot, trembling, and wrapped in a comforter. Aha, there you are. You locked me out, she exclaimed. Mary shivered in the cold, her teeth chattering as we went into the house to warm up. At that moment, I couldn't even bring myself to speak to her. But eventually, once Mary had stopped shivering, I decided to break the silence. I heard from Bob. Who were you with on the second floor? I asked. What are you talking about? You must have the wrong idea, Mary replied defensively. And Bob, what were you doing breaking into someone's house? Why didn't you use the intercom? I added. I noticed a pair of men's shoes near the entrance. But are those Tom's? Let me go ask him, I said. Well, there was actually a burglar in the house, Mary admitted hesitantly. I was about to explode with anger when something surprising happened. It was a close call. That's serious. I think we should call the police, Emily suggested, pulling out her phone. Wait, I see what you're trying to do. All right, you caught me. So who is that man? I demanded. Mary hung her head in silence. Weren't you two together when you jumped off the balcony? What happened to him? Where is he? I pressed further. He left a while ago, Mary replied quietly. She seemed shocked to be abandoned by the man she was having an affair with. She had spent the whole night barefoot, wrapped in a comforter, while he had gone home. Oh, so he left you? That's unfortunate. Bob's words struck a nerve, and Mary's face flushed with embarrassment. How could you neglect Alan like that? Were you planning to lock him in the room while you had your fun? I'm not interested in your affair, but I can't forgive you for what you did to Alan. I expressed my anger. I agree with her. At his age, he can manage on his own just fine. I'm his mother, but that doesn't mean I have to prioritize him over everything else in my life. I have my own things to do. Just because he's my son doesn't mean he can interfere. Mary defended herself, shocking Emily, Bob, and me with her callousness. Tom will be coming home from the hospital soon. Alan and I were supposed to stay at Emily's house until then. But when the time came for Tom to be released, we decided to have the discussion at our house. However, I didn't want Alan to be there in case Mary said something hurtful to him. So I let him have some fun with Bob, I explained. When Tom arrived, Emily laid out the facts plainly. Mary, is this true? Tom asked, clearly shocked. Well, you were busy with work and I was lonely. I'm sorry, Mary admitted, her voice shaking. Mary, did you really lock my mom out of the house in the snow? Tom asked, seeking clarification. No, that's not what happened. And what about locking Alan in the room while you were having an affair? I interjected, unable to contain my anger. Tom, didn't Mom tell you about the Friday night parties? Why didn't you and Mary talk about it? Alan spoke up, surprising us all with his maturity. I'm not sure how to approach it, but the important thing is to never hesitate to ask for help. I've been exhausted from work too, and it's been tough. And I'm sure Mary has her own issues living with Mom. You two seem to avoid facing problems and take the easy way out. Have you ever thought about others? You need to talk it out and figure out what you're going to do together. You're both adults. But remember, you have to consider Alan. I won't let you abandon him, Tom addressed the situation calmly. A few days later, they decided to get divorced. Mary was ordered to pay child support and alimony to Tom, who got custody of Alan. Mary confessed everything, and the divorce proceeded smoothly. We never found out who she was cheating with. Mary refused to talk about it, and Tom was too focused on building a new life for himself and Alan to dwell on it. But 3 months later, the other man's family found out about the affair, and we learned his identity. To my surprise, the other man was married to one of Mary's mom friends. He was one of the men who sometimes attended the Friday night parties. He and Mary continued their relationship even after she divorced Tom. The reason Mary agreed to the divorce so easily was that she didn't want anything about the parties to be revealed. I start cleaning without saying much. Then my ex-husband, James, talks to me. "You're not even crying." James thought I would resist and cry when he asked for a divorce. Honestly, I thought he was selfish. I wasn't the only one who stopped loving him. "Well, James, you're the one who's going to have a tougher time after the divorce." Instead of crying, I could barely stop myself from laughing. "What do you mean?" James, my ex-husband, asked me, looking suspicious. "Between you, a housewife, and me, a successful corporate worker, you'll have a harder time after the divorce. And I plan to marry someone else while you'll be alone." Well, that might be true in a regular situation, but it looks like Emma, the woman you're cheating with, isn't exactly top-notch. Wait, how do I know her name? My name is Kate, and I'm 32 years old. I'm a housewife. I met my husband James when we were both the same age at a party. We hit it off right away, becoming good friends. James worked in sales at a trading company, making a lot more money than most people our age. Because of him, I've had a comfortable life, but our marriage had a big problem. Things weren't going well. It was a serious issue. We'd been married for 7 years already. At first, we were deeply in love, spending lots of time together and sharing meals, even when James was busy with work. But that love faded away. "Take care. What about dinner?" "I don't need it. I'll eat out. You can go to bed first. I'll be home late." "All right, got it." When we first got married, he used to say, "Eating together with you, Kate, is my greatest happiness." But now, it's normal for him to come home after midnight, finding me already asleep, and leaving for work without a proper talk in the morning. It's like being ignored by a teenager going through puberty. When these days became the norm, I noticed some changes in James. Huh? Did he always use this hair product? And now he has a whole bunch of skincare products and cologne. Before, he didn't care much about how he looked. He mostly wore suits and didn't have many casual clothes. But suddenly, he's buying expensive brand-name outfits. I wouldn't mind if he just decided to start caring more about his appearance. I always thought he should. But the reason for this change seems strange. Watching James closely, I started feeling suspicious. He began using his phone in secret, even taking it with him to the bathroom and shower. He used to leave it lying around, and I almost sat on it a few times, worrying I might damage it. Why has he suddenly changed so much? As James's behavior continued, my suspicions grew stronger. Was he cheating whenever he came home late? But I had no solid proof, just doubts. Despite the distance in our relationship, a part of me still wanted to believe in him. So the idea of my suspicions being true terrified me. I tried to act like everything was okay, hoping to improve our relationship. I tried to talk more and suggested going out together, but every time I reached out, I was met with indifference. I guess it's understandable. After 7 years of marriage, our relationship had been shaky for a while. Despite my efforts, feeling ignored made me feel incredibly lonely. With all this happening, my emotions started to wear thin. One night, I couldn't hold it in any longer, and I finally decided to confront James. "Hey, are you cheating on me?" I finally asked to James. He just looked at me, not saying a word. "Come on, say something. Are you?" He stayed silent for a moment. Then, without a word, he got up from the couch and came over to where I was sitting at the table. He lowered his head towards me. "I'm sorry, Kate. I want a divorce." I was speechless, completely caught off guard by his unexpected confession. Ignoring my stunned silence, he went on. "I've fallen in love with someone else. I want to start a new life with her." How could he say something so selfish without even thinking? What about our 7 years together? I had a feeling there was another woman, but I never expected him to drop this bombshell so suddenly. All my efforts to fix our relationship seemed pointless. Was the man I fell in love with really this heartless and selfish? When we first met, I thought he was the most amazing person in the world. I couldn't find the words to say, my mind swirling with these thoughts. Then my husband said something that made me doubt if I heard him right. The truth is, she's pregnant with my child. I want to be with her for our child's future. I felt like everything was spinning, like I was about to collapse. Everything around me seemed to turn white. We hadn't had a child in our 7 years together. We hadn't even been using protection. In fact, we had been actively trying to conceive and had sought infertility treatments. Despite our efforts, we couldn't have a child. Medical reports showed my husband had fertility issues, but he always expressed his desire for a child. So despite the challenges, we never stopped trying. I always did my best to meet his expectations. Lately though, our relationship had lost its spark, and we stopped trying to conceive. It seems his decision to divorce was largely influenced by the fact that he was having a child with his mistress. I've always wanted a child, especially to show my mom her grandchild soon. You understand, right, Kate? So please, let's divorce. My mother-in-law had been seriously ill and hospitalized for the past 2 years. I understood his urgency to give her a grandchild. But to have a child with another woman instead of his wife, it was devastating. I wanted a child too, which is why I underwent fertility treatments. I thought we were in this together, sharing the pain of infertility. Do you even realize how selfish you're being? I yelled at him in frustration, but James just looked down, apologizing. It felt like he was waiting for the storm to pass, which only made me angrier. What kind of woman is she? Just because she's pregnant with your baby, I'm not ready to accept a divorce. I pressed James to tell me more about the woman he was involved with. But he insisted, "I'm sorry, but please respect her privacy." What? How selfish can you be? As your wife, I have a right to know. Tell me everything. But no matter how much I pushed, James refused to share any significant details about her. She's 2 years younger than you, Kate. That's all. She works with me. What a joke. He must really care about her. Despite my persistence, James wouldn't give any real answers. For a few days we argued about it, but I adamantly refused to agree to a divorce on James's terms. I didn't want to give in to him so easily. Throughout our discussions, James kept apologizing and bowing his head. "Please, I no longer have feelings for you. What's the point in staying married?" Even my mother knows about this and she's fine with it. Apparently, James had already spoken to my mother-in-law about our situation. That shook me. While my relationship with my mother-in-law had been strained lately, I thought we were still close. Yet, James kept dropping bombshells one after another. I've already given her an engagement ring. We're planning to live together soon. All that's left is for us to get a divorce, James revealed. I felt dizzy, like I was going to faint. My husband James was actually serious about leaving me for the woman he was cheating with, but I still couldn't bring myself to agree to a divorce. This tug-of-war between James and me went on for almost a month. When James seemed to have run out of patience, he begged on his knees. I can't do this anymore. Please just agree to the divorce. Our relationship has been broken for a long time. There's no point in dragging it out like this. Please divorce me, my husband begged, his forehead pressed against the floor in a pleading posture. I had been resisting for nearly a month. Maybe it was time to accept the inevitable and agree to the divorce. Fine, let's go through with the divorce. But I'm asking for alimony and my fair share of our assets. I understand. I'm prepared for that, I said. We discussed the alimony in detail, and I requested $50,000. It was more than usual, but considering I had invested a lot in our home during our 7 years of marriage, I felt it was fair compensation. James agreed to my terms. We also decided on asset division, with me receiving half of the balance in our joint account and him covering the cost of my relocation. Then, I signed the divorce papers that James had prepared. As I filled out the paperwork, my heart was filled with various emotions. Even though our love had faded, we had shared a life together under the same roof for 7 years, and it was all coming to an end with just a single piece of paper. Without any lingering feelings for James, I submitted the divorce papers to the city hall the next day, and our mutual divorce was finalized. Soon after, James wasted no time in marrying the other woman. Whether she rushed him or not, with a baby on the way, he probably wanted to be with her as soon as possible. I was honestly taken aback by how quickly he moved on, especially considering I hadn't even finished sorting through our shared belongings in the apartment. Feeling the need to hurry and pack up my things, I went to the apartment we used to share. As luck would have it, our timing overlapped, and James was also there when I arrived. Without exchanging many words, I immediately started tidying up the space. James, my ex-husband, finally spoke up. "You're not shedding a tear, huh?" It seemed James had expected me to resist and cry when he pleaded for a divorce on his knees. Honestly, I had always thought he was quite self-centered, and he wasn't the only one who had fallen out of love. Maybe because I had been refusing the divorce for so long, James might have assumed I still had feelings for him. It seemed like a misunderstanding on his part, but the reason I hadn't agreed to the divorce right away was because I was stubbornly determined to investigate his mistress on my own terms, rather than simply going along with James's wishes. Well, James, you're the one who's going to have a tougher time after the divorce, not me. Instead of crying, I could barely hold back laughter. Huh? What do you mean? My ex-husband James looked at me suspiciously. Considering you're a corporate hotshot and I'm just a housewife, you'll have more challenges. And since I'm planning to remarry, you'll be on your own. Well, in a normal situation that might be true. But it seems like Emma, the woman you're cheating with, is quite trashy. Wait, how do you know her name? You thought I was just being stubborn and refusing our divorce. I continued, watching James's face pale. I had hired a private investigator to look into her all this time. In just a few weeks, I had gathered a lot of information about his mistress. Firstly, her name is Emma. She's 27 years old, divorced twice, and currently living at her parents' home. Emma seems to have a questionable reputation, constantly involved with different men. She even lost custody of her child due to being a bad influence. Indeed, the investigator saw her entering a motel with other men. Just to be sure, I had asked for photos as evidence. When I shared all the information and showed him the pictures, James collapsed on the spot. No way. Emma can't be like that. She only had eyes for me, and we were planning to build a happy family. James seemed deeply in love with Emma. It was frustrating, but this woman indeed seemed to have a talent for charming men. What? You're lying. This is all made up to shake me up. This photo must be fake, James protested. It was exasperating to see him so foolishly blinded by love. Believe it or not, it's up to you. But even now, your mistress is involved with other men. Or should I say, your new wife? Maybe the child isn't even yours." James's face grew even paler. "No way, not Emma." These were the findings from the private investigators, so the possibility of being deceived was high. Perhaps among her multiple boyfriends, James was the one who made the most money, which is why she chose him to marry. Quite an honor, isn't it? Even if the child may not be biologically yours, you wanted a child anyway, so raise your child well. I delivered this final blow to James and left the apartment with my belongings. After a while, I received an email from him. He wanted to get back together. As I suspected, the child Emma had given birth to wasn't James's. When he confronted Emma, she retorted, "I didn't know whose child it was until it was born." But since James was already married to Emma, legally he had to raise the child she gave birth to as his own. James had just been a money tree for her. As proof, when paying alimony to me, James had covered Emma's portion too. So, in total, he paid me $80,000. Furious, James confronted Emma, but she simply said, "You seemed happy to serve me." Eventually, she left the child behind and disappeared. James called me, begging, "You were right. I was deceived. I'm really sorry. I want to start over again." But I was just disgusted. "You think I'm going to come back to you just because you're saying those things? You had an affair, that's a fact. You betrayed me, that's also a fact. You need to accept reality." I hung up the phone after that. Later, I heard from a mutual acquaintance that James handed over the child Emma left behind to her parents, telling them to take responsibility. Emma's parents responded, "That's troublesome. You raise the child." But James stubbornly refused, saying, "I have no obligation to raise a child that's not biologically mine." He submitted DNA test results to prove the child wasn't his and revoked his acknowledgement of the child. Emma's parents apparently didn't know the child wasn't James's. After they found Emma, they took her back home and are forcing her to raise the child in semi-captivity. They're keeping a close eye on her to prevent her from freely meeting other men. Meanwhile, even though my ex-husband James has cut all ties with Emma, he paid me $80,000 in alimony, including Emma's portion, which wiped out his savings. He's been demanding Emma repay the alimony he covered for her, but she doesn't seem to care and claims she can't pay back what she doesn't have. Sadly, James has become a divorced man with no savings, unable to focus on his work, and making many mistakes. Now he's been reassigned to a rural area with no chance of promotion, living a lonely life. On the other hand, I've moved back to my parents' house and am helping with their farming business. After a few years, I fell in love and married a local fisherman. We don't have children, but I'm happily spending every day with my husband, who is always kind to me. My name is Gracie. I'm 27 years old and I work both at home and in an office. My husband, Aaron, is the same age as me. He loves his mother a lot, but his mom, Eliza, tends to be quite mean to me. Even though our marriage has had its problems, we just celebrated our second anniversary and I'm proud of how I've managed to handle everything. Work has become my way of relaxing. Because of this, I've been getting promoted frequently, which is rare for women. Right now, I'm on a business trip traveling around Europe for meetings. I'm currently in an important meeting. During the meeting, my phone, which was on silent, started vibrating. I thought it might be an emergency because I had 2 missed calls. When I checked my phone, I saw that the calls were from my mother-in-law, Eliza. What's going on? I thought, worried that something might be wrong. I quickly decided to call back. Just as I was about to leave my desk, Eliza called again. "Hello, Gracie. Where are you?" she asked, sounding annoyed. I picked up the call and wasn't happy with the tone of her voice. "Maybe I shouldn't have answered this," I muttered. "Hi, Eliza. How are you? Is there something urgent?" "Why aren't you answering me? I asked where you are," she said, sounding impatient. Even though her attitude annoyed me, I was in the middle of an important meeting and didn't want to argue. So I said softly, "Sorry, didn't Aaron tell you? I'm in a meeting on a business trip. Can I call you back when I'm done?" Of course, Aaron told me. "What are you doing, leaving your house and husband alone? Come back home right now," Eliza demanded, with her usual sudden and unreasonable request. I'm sorry, Eliza, but I'm in an important meeting and I can't just. I started to explain, but she cut me off. You're so bossy, even though you're just Aaron's wife. I don't care about your excuses. Just come home right now. Today is very important. Do you understand? What? Today is important? I asked, surprised. Eliza finally admitted, we're celebrating my 60th birthday today. She said this in a smug tone. I remembered her birthday was supposed to be at the end of the month. I was surprised to hear it was today, especially since I was on a business trip. My husband and I had already planned a special dinner for her birthday at a nice restaurant. I was fed up with Eliza trying to boss me around again. It seemed like she was getting worse every year, especially when she knew I was busy with important work. I told her, as I've mentioned, I'm on a business trip, so I can't come home. Oh, that's funny, she said. I called Aaron earlier, and he said he'd take a day off for me. All the relatives will be there, but you, Gracie, always working. You're so cold. How do you feel about your husband's family? I knew if I listened to her much longer, her sarcasm would just continue. Since I was still in a meeting, I couldn't stay on the phone with her, so I said, I'm sorry, but no matter what you say, I can't make it to your 60th birthday celebration. Eliza's tone changed abruptly. She took a deep breath and said, fine then, I won't consider you family. Don't come back home. It's a divorce. Aaron deserves better. Her harsh words hit me hard. I was both angry and upset, but I didn't want to argue with her on the phone. I said, all right, I'll talk to you when I get home. I'm sorry, but I have to go. Eliza snapped, what's with that attitude? I told you not to come back. I'll talk to Aaron myself. Then she hung up. I was exhausted from dealing with my mother-in-law. I returned to the meeting with a deep sigh. After 2 days of meetings, I finally made it home. On the way back, I was so angry and frustrated with my mother-in-law that I barely remembered how I got home. When I opened the front door and called out, I heard my husband's tired voice say, welcome back. I took off my heels and went straight to the living room, leaving my luggage at the door. There, I saw a stack of cardboard boxes and my husband, Aaron, sweating as he taped them up. What's with all the boxes? I asked. Aaron told me the boxes were packed with my things. He explained that Eliza had indeed celebrated her 60th birthday on the day she called me, without me. She told everyone that I had neglected her birthday and was rude on the phone. Eliza even told the relatives she wanted me to be divorced and sent back to my parents' house because I wasn't good enough for her son. This sounded exactly like something my mother-in-law would do, so I asked Aaron, and then what happened? Did your mother tell you to get a divorce and you agreed to it? No, I didn't exactly agree, Aaron said. But she told me to pack up your stuff, and I didn't have much choice. What could I do? He stopped taping up the boxes and spoke in a tired voice. What do you mean? You didn't argue with your mother? Does that mean you're okay with the idea of getting a divorce? Aaron explained that his father, Alex, had also told him, if Eliza's upset, it'll be tough for you, so you better do what she says. So Aaron went along with the divorce. I couldn't believe he was accepting the divorce so easily. What is wrong with Aaron's family? His father is controlled by his mother, and Aaron blindly obeys her too. It felt like no one was on my side. When I was at a loss for words, Aaron said, what my mother says is final. It's only until she calms down and things settle. This divorce isn't real. I'll come for you when things are better. He looked at me with pleading eyes. I wish he would show that kind of pleading to his own mother. How could a grown man like Aaron be so afraid of his mom? I thought, there's no saving this. I almost felt ashamed, questioning what I ever saw in him. But then I realized maybe this was an opportunity. Staying with Aaron would only mean more torment from Eliza, always pushing me toward a divorce. Maybe it was actually lucky to get a divorce from him without much hassle. I could support myself just fine. Even if I lived alone, I wouldn't lack for anything. Suddenly, everything seemed clearer. I looked at Aaron and said, fine, let's get a divorce. Right after that, I called Eliza. After 3 tries, she finally picked up. Hello, Eliza answered. I said quietly, as you wish, we're getting a divorce. Eliza, sounding triumphant, replied in a bouncy tone, yes, please, leave. Finally, you realize you're not good enough for Aaron. I'm so relieved. Don't worry, I'll find him a new wife who's obedient, pretty, and nice to her in-laws. She continued, I'm sure Aaron will be popular. I'll take care of him until he finds his next wife. so don't worry about that. After she finished with her sarcasm, I told Eliza, "Well, don't misunderstand me, Mother." Eliza, still in a good mood, responded, "Oh, you're just a sore loser. Don't worry about me." "Oh, and Gracie," she added, "I got the divorce papers from the city office and gave them to Aaron. Don't forget to sign them." Then, without another word, she hung up. Aaron, who had been listening to my conversation with Eliza, looked relieved. I thought, is Aaron really that clueless? I asked him, "By the way, does your mother know you're a full-time house husband?" He replied, "How could I tell her that? My mother is obsessed with the idea that I'm a high-ranking employee at a big company." He said this with a firm tone. "Oh right," I said. "Now that I think about it, you've never been honest with Eliza. You always wear a worn-out sweatshirt at home, but you change into a suit whenever you go out to see her. You also pretend not to be home when she calls, making her think you're at work." Eliza had boasted at her 60th birthday party that Aaron was such a devoted son he took time off just to attend her celebration. She also mentioned that with his status, he could easily find a more obedient and attractive wife than me. I'm sure the truth will come out once we're divorced. But Eliza, who believes her son is perfect, would never expect that Aaron had actually quit his job at the major company. Aaron had actually quit his job about a year ago. What Eliza saw as her elite son, a symbol of high status, was now just an unemployed full-time house husband. Aaron lost his job after a major mistake led to a written apology, a demotion, and a pay cut. He probably didn't tell his mother about this. Aaron must have been deeply shocked by his fall from the elite path. Since Eliza had always pampered and spoiled him, he became quite fragile and sensitive. Just the thought of going back to the office to deal with the consequences of his mistake made him feel anxious and sick. He couldn't even leave the house, let alone go to work. Initially, Aaron tried to report his absences and applied for paid leave, but eventually he stopped even calling in. As his unauthorized absences piled up, he got fired. Now, he seems to have no plans to look for another job and is heavily relying on my income. Aaron hasn't told Eliza about this because he knows she would be furious and upset. I was a bit disappointed I wouldn't get to see Eliza's reaction when she discovered Aaron's situation after I left. I imagined she'd be shocked, maybe even have a stroke. But that was no longer my concern. Aaron handed me the divorce papers and said, "This is just a cover to convince my mother, okay?" I quickly submitted the papers and signed a lease for a new apartment, moving in as soon as possible. A month later, I got a call from Eliza, even though I thought I cut ties with her for good. Curious about what she wanted, I answered, "What do you want now? Aren't you happy to be rid of me?" I said with a hint of sarcasm. Eliza replied, "You're still the same. Just listen to me." She continued in her usual tone, talking about Aaron. After I left, Eliza had visited Aaron's apartment several times to help with chores. Each time she found him just lounging around in his room with no sign of him going to work. Since he didn't seem sick, she asked me if I had any idea what was going on. I held back a laugh and replied casually, I see. Well, Aaron's like that because he has no intention of working again." Eliza seemed to have forgotten she was the one who'd kicked me out and asked, "Gracie, can you do something about it?" "Why should I?" "You didn't want me in your family and wanted nothing to do with me," I said. It was so typical of her to ask for something only when it suited her after mistreating me for so long. She then said, "I was wondering if you said something to Aaron before you left." I couldn't believe how she was trying to make me the bad guy. Doesn't she see the problem is with her son, not me? I'm the one who was hurt here, you know. "Oh really?" Eliza said. "You only married Aaron for a luxurious life, right? So why would a divorce be so painful for you?" She looked at me as if I'd married Aaron just for his money. Are you kidding me? I was the one supporting Aaron financially during our marriage. I was the one providing for him. In reality, I couldn't afford to live extravagantly because of Aaron. I was fine with the divorce, but should I consider asking for alimony? Eliza couldn't believe what I said. "How dare you make up something like that? Gracie, you just forgot to ask for alimony, didn't you? Aaron has a higher income and position than you. Don't be so unreasonable. If you want money, Aaron can pay whatever you want. After all, Aaron is a high-level employee at a major company." Eliza's argument was as outrageous as ever. Maybe Aaron hadn't told her the truth yet. I didn't want to seem like I was just tattling, but I saw an opportunity to get back at her. So I told her, Your proud son is actually a full-time house husband. He quit his job a long time ago." "What? You're lying," Eliza shouted, unable to accept what I said. Her voice was so loud, I thought it might damage my eardrums. I held the phone away from my ear and said, "Why don't you check with the company? You'll find out who's telling the truth." Eliza went silent for a moment. Then she said, "Well, what if that's true? How are we going to manage? I can't support my son on just my pension, and no one will want to marry him if he's unemployed. What are we going to do?" Her voice had clearly softened, and I couldn't help but grin. "What shall we do?" I asked. Eliza was silent for a moment, then mumbled something with someone beside her. Finally, she said, "Hey Gracie, will you please come back home?" I was puzzled by her sudden change of tone, but replied firmly, "No, we're already divorced. I wouldn't come back to your family if heaven and earth turned upside down." Then I heard commotion in the background. Someone was shouting. It sounded like Aaron. "I told you I'd come for you when things settled down." Aaron's voice rang out. Eliza responded, "Yes, yes, you could remarry my son if you wanted." "What are you talking about?" I asked. "No way, I wouldn't do it for the world. Don't joke about this. Thanks, but seriously, no." I made it clear to Eliza that I wasn't interested in getting involved with her son or dealing with any more toxic relationships. I wanted nothing to do with someone who adored his mother too much. "I did what you asked me to do, so please stop changing your mind," I said. Eliza replied, "But there's a bit of verbal sparring here. It's not like you should take my words so seriously. You've been talking back to me with a nonchalant attitude, haven't you? I didn't think you'd actually go through with divorcing my son." It seemed she hadn't expected me to reject her offer so firmly. In response to Eliza's bitter excuses, I said, "Well, I was just putting up with it. Besides, Aaron packed up my things and kicked me out without consulting me." I let out my frustration, listing everything she had done to me. "You see, that was just a prank," she said. "A prank? It's worse than that," I said, feeling completely fed up. There was nothing more to say. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 1 o'clock. My lunch break had been wasted on this pointless conversation. "Ah, Eliza, are you done now?" I asked. "What, Gracie? What did you say?" She replied, her voice still annoyingly sweet. Did Eliza really think a sweet voice would get her a good answer? Knowing I wouldn't meet her expectations, I said, "I'm going to hang up now. I have another meeting in a few minutes and need to review some documents." As I started to disconnect the call, Eliza kept insisting, Wait, Gracie. Hey, Gracie, say something." I could hear her shouting, and she also scolded Aaron, saying, "You didn't handle this right, and look what happened." It was clear that Eliza blames everyone else for her problems. I was so fed up with her that I ended the call and blocked her number. Afterward, Aaron tried to contact me constantly. Seizing the opportunity, I asked my lawyer to pursue alimony. Aaron's family, probably nervous about legal action, quickly paid the alimony in a lump sum. It seemed my ex-parents-in-law advanced the money. Because of this, Alex and Eliza were constantly irritated with Aaron, telling him daily to find a job and work, which Aaron was fed up with. The former Elites had fallen far from their previous status. Aaron ended up moving back to his parents' house because he couldn't afford his apartment rent. He blamed his parents for his divorce and was now draining their pension and retirement savings. Like mother, like son, they blamed each other for their problems and refused to reflect on their own actions. They were even planning to apply for welfare soon. I hope the government will help them realize that they can't continue their selfish ways. As for me, the proposal I made during my business trip was accepted, leading to a major contract being signed. I was promoted again, received a higher salary, and now enjoy a rich bachelorette life, free from in-laws' torment and financial dependency on a family member. If I ever consider marriage again, I'll definitely do a thorough background check to avoid any mama's boys or crazy in-laws. My name is Amy Snyder, and I'm 27 years old. I reside with my father and mother. Our family has always stuck together as a trio since my early years. Growing up, I've always admired my dad. He's the epitome of hard work, running his own bustling business. Though his schedule keeps him away from home most of the time, whenever he finds a moment, he dedicates it to me. On his off days, he prioritizes spending time with me, proving himself to be an exceptional father. My mom, however, paints a different picture. As far back as I can recall, she has never been employed. While she tends to household matters, she's never lent support to my dad's business or pursued a career outside our home. Despite our comfortable lifestyle, with my mom often seen socializing and attending events, her lack of involvement in my life has left me feeling somewhat neglected. There were moments of profound loneliness, but my dad's unwavering presence always filled that void. He understood the indifference my mom held towards me and made it his mission to ensure I never felt neglected or alone. As I grew older, my mother's tendency to break promises became apparent. While my dad's commitments were steadfast, my mother's casual approach to promises left me disillusioned. I learned not to hold her pledges in high regard. Conversely, my dad's reliability and trustworthiness garnered my admiration. I even entertained thoughts of joining his company after graduating from university. Being the only child, I saw it as a way to honor my father's legacy and continue his work. Upon reaching my 20s, my father began imparting invaluable wisdom during our outings for drinks. Meanwhile, my mother's involvement in my life remained superficial. The only time she interjected was during my sophomore year of college when I expressed my desire to join my father's company. "Dad, I want to work at your company after graduation. I'm already preparing for it. I want to follow in your footsteps someday," I announced eagerly. "Amy, are you sure about that? A girl doesn't need to pursue such endeavors." My mother intervened, her words dripping with traditional expectations. "Why not? I want to work hard like Dad," I insisted. "A woman should find a good man and let her husband provide for her," she countered, echoing typical sentiments. Disheartened by her lack of understanding, I chose not to engage further. I refused to live a life tethered to someone else's ambitions, mirroring my mother's existence. I had always aspired to become an independent woman, determined to navigate through my college years on my own terms. After that pivotal moment, I dedicated myself to diligent study, paving the path to join my father's company immediately after graduation. Though my mother remained unconvinced, it seemed she eventually resigned herself to my decision. "If you choose to live this way, so be it. But remember, you'll bear the consequences of not heeding your mother's advice," she remarked resignedly. "If you're willing to accept that, then do as you please." So I followed her directive by stepping into my father's company, inadvertently widening the chasm between my mother and me. Conversely, my bond with my father deepened as we spent more time together. Reflecting on it now, I realized my mother wasn't pleased with the turn of events. Upon joining my father's company, he invested considerable effort in my training, which, unbeknownst to me, was driven by his declining health. It took him nearly half a year to acquaint me with the intricacies of the job before he collapsed at our workplace, swiftly whisked away to the hospital. Over the next 5 years, he valiantly battled his illness. "Emmy, how's the company faring without your dad?" my mother inquired, her concern veiled by skepticism. "It's challenging, but everyone's rallying behind me. Dad entrusted me with everything I need," I replied confidently. "Well, as long as that's the case, just ensure you don't leave the company to ruin as the second generation," she cautioned, her words tinged with apprehension. "You lack any genuine interest or affection for the company. You're merely preoccupied with others' perceptions," I retorted, disheartened by her lack of faith. During my father's illness, our disagreements were frequent. Despite his weakening state, he made sporadic visits to the company, emphasizing its significance. "These employees in this company are invaluable treasures to me, but I must relinquish my hold on them," he confessed, his voice laced with emotion. "Amy, I've witnessed your dedication over the years. I trust you to safeguard this place and everyone here. I don't know if I can emulate you, Dad, but I'll strive to uphold your legacy," I pledged solemnly. From that day forth, the mantle of leadership was bestowed upon me. With my father mostly confined to the hospital, my days were consumed with the company's affairs, leaving little time for homecomings. I prioritized visiting him regularly, carving out time amidst my busy schedule. My mother, on the other hand, fulfilled only the basic duties, such as delivering changes of clothes to him. Even that seemed to inconvenience her. I couldn't help but wonder about her feelings towards my father. Did she lack any sense of gratitude or compassion for his illness? The thought left me feeling sorry for him. recalling the sacrifices he made for me during my childhood, a time when my mother's affection remained elusive. Despite my exhaustion, I made a concerted effort to visit him as often as possible, a routine that persisted for about a year until he peacefully passed away in his sleep. Amidst the whirlwind of tasks that followed, I barely had a moment to grieve. My mother, oblivious to my emotional turmoil, expected me to handle everything from funeral arrangements to hospital paperwork. Realistically, I knew I couldn't rely on my mother, who had never ventured beyond the confines of our home. So I silently assumed responsibility for the myriad tasks. The day after the funeral, my mother broached the subject. "Amy, now that the funeral's over, you've settled down, haven't you?" she inquired. With a heavy heart, I accepted the reality of the situation. "Please leave this house. I've just inherited 200 million yen, so I have no use for you anymore." "Thank you," she declared, as though it were a mere formality. Her words stung, but I had anticipated them. Further discussion seemed futile. Did she truly believe that wealth could replace familial bonds and absolve her of responsibility? With a multitude of questions swirling in my mind, I made the decision to depart. The next day, I arranged for the sale of all belongings associated with me, leaving my mother utterly surprised at the speed of my departure. I had meticulously planned my departure, but I harbored a secret from my mother. Despite her claim of inheriting 200 million yen, my father had entrusted all financial matters to me, designating me as the sole inheritor. Not a single yen remained for my mother, a decision my father made adamantly while he was still in good health. "Your mother lacks the understanding of money management or prudent spending. I want you to provide her with monthly household expenses," he instructed me. "If she receives a lump sum, she's likely to squander it immediately. If she protests, refuse to give her a penny." Though my father's last words were spoken in jest, he handed me an SD card containing a video message addressed to my mother. While I never envisioned showing it to her, recent events suggested its necessity might arise sooner than later. After my departure, I anticipated my mother would reach out to me, but her summons came sooner than expected. "Come home immediately," she demanded over the phone. "I'm working, Mom. What's the matter?" I replied, feeling a pang of annoyance. "I just need to talk to you." "Please come quickly," she insisted. With a sigh, I reluctantly headed back to our family home, clutching the SD card in my hand. As soon as my mother laid eyes on me, she launched into accusations. "You absconded with all of your father's inheritance, didn't you? I knew something was amiss when you left so abruptly. Hand over your father's inheritance to me now," she demanded, her greed palpable. "How selfish can you be? You can't even fulfill your duties as a mother," I retorted, my frustration simmering. In response, I silently extended the SD card to her. Confused, she inspected it. "What's this?" she queried. "I suppose you don't even know how to watch this," I remarked, masking my disappointment. I retrieved my laptop, inserted the SD card, and played the video. On the screen, my father appeared, as vibrant as I remembered him. I couldn't help but wonder how my mother would react to this video letter. Silently, I exited the room, leaving her to watch it alone. I had never witnessed my mother defy my father before, but now, in the wake of his passing, would his words resonate with her? Upon returning to the room, I found my mother in tears, her emotions laid bare. I was taken aback, my mother, shedding tears over a video of my late father. I was intrigued by the contents of the video letter he had left for her, but hesitated to watch it myself. Consequently, I remained clueless about the cause of her tears. "Mom, are you okay?" I inquired, concern lacing my voice. "Yes, I'll be fine. For now, I understand. I'll adhere to your father's wishes and entrust everything to you from now on. Please, go home for today. Call me once you've had time to gather yourself," she replied, her tone subdued. Sensing her desire for privacy, I left promptly, pondering over how my father had managed to silence my mother. Questions swirled in my mind as I made my way home. Nearly a month passed without any communication from my mother, prompting concern to gnaw at me. During my lunch break, I decided to pay a visit to my parents' house, hoping to check on her. However, she wasn't home. That evening, I returned once more, relieved to find the lights on. "Sorry for dropping in unexpectedly. I came by this afternoon, but you weren't home, so I grew concerned," I explained upon seeing her. "I'm sorry, I was out for my part-time job during the day," my mother explained upon my return. "A part-time job?" I echoed incredulously. My understanding of my mother painted her as someone vehemently opposed to work. How had it come to this? Didn't you watch that video? It was a video letter addressed to you. I retorted, baffled by her sudden change in behavior. You can take it home. You should watch it too. Hammy, can I watch it? I asked, extending the SD card to her. Very well, she acquiesced, passing it back to me. Feeling a twinge of apprehension, I returned to the office and settled at my father's desk. With a deep breath, I played the video. Honey, if you're watching this, it means you've not been able to communicate with Amy. First of all, thank you so much for helping me raise Amy until now. Without you, I don't think I could have managed the company while bringing up Amy. My father's voice resonated through the room. As his words continued, a sense of unease crept over me. Then he uttered something unexpected, something that shook me to my core. You've taken care of Amy, even though she is not your child, and I have nothing but gratitude for you. You've stood by my side for so many years, but as a result, you've given up on your dreams and have reached your age without earning your own living. For that, I take responsibility because I have allowed you to live a life of luxury. I'm sure you'll be in trouble when I'm gone. I'm not my mother's child, I blurted out, the realization hitting me like a ton of bricks. But then it clicked. Despite the lack of overt affection, she had cared for me every day, doing the bare minimum for a child who wasn't her own. Who was this person? I didn't register our marriage because you told me you felt bad for your sister, so I ended up supporting your living and didn't do anything else. I'm sorry, but once I'm gone, I worry about the rest of your life. There's no one to support you, and I've taken your life away. I sat in disbelief as my father spoke, his words flowing with unexpected clarity. It was all news to me, his concerns, his regrets, his hopes for our future. Throughout the night, I grappled with the weight of his revelations before confronting my mother the following day. Mom, I watched the video from Dad yesterday. You know it all now, I began, my voice tinged with a mixture of confusion and realization. I raised you because I was asked to. That's all, she confessed, her tone heavy with the weight of untold truths. What happened to my biological mother? I pressed, seeking clarity amidst the swirling chaos of newfound information. You were the child of my sister and your father, she explained somberly. My sister died right after giving birth to you, and I promised your distressed father that I would help raise Amy. I would become your mother. With her revelation, everything fell into place, even the parts I had previously only imagined. I learned of my mother's sacrifice, how she had set aside her own dreams to fulfill her promise to my father. I recalled how my mother used to work in a diner, her vibrant spirit and dedication palpable. Her dream had been to own her own diner, yet when she chose to become my mother, she shelved that dream. However, inspired by my father's words and prompted by the memory of her deferred dream, my mother made a decision. She resolved to reclaim that dream, embarking on a journey to pursue it once more. Currently, she is undergoing training as a part-timer, determined to turn her dream of owning a diner into reality. I should have done this earlier. Working is fun and suits me. I had no idea, so it's my fault you didn't work. I'm really sorry for not knowing anything, my mother admitted, her tone filled with regret. It's not your fault, Amy. I made the decision myself. But I'm not good with children, so I couldn't handle you well. I'm the one who caused you trouble, she continued, taking responsibility for her actions. As we conversed, I realized it was the first time we had such an open dialogue. At this stage in my life, I finally felt like I had come to understand my mother a bit better. Our conversations became more frequent, leading us to a decision: to use the money left by my father to fund the opening of her shop. Once she started working, my mother became somewhat more humble. She hesitated when the topic of funds for the shop came up, a behavior that would have been unimaginable not too long ago. While maintaining my regular job, I also assisted with the opening of her diner. This brought me into frequent contact with my mother, fostering a newfound relationship between us. Regarding living expenses, she insisted on managing them with her own income, refusing to accept help from my father's inheritance, promising that you'll tell me if you're struggling. After all, Dad trusted me to take care of you, I urged her. I'll be fine living on my own. It doesn't cost that much. But in terms of my diner's expenses, she trailed off, her determination evident. I'll be relying on you. Of course, I'm looking forward to it too, so do your best, my mother encouraged, her eyes filled with hope and anticipation. After many years, we finally became a real family. And now we are living harmoniously. She isn't my birth mother, and perhaps it was just the right time for me to learn this truth. Your diner is finally going to open tomorrow. Your dream is coming true, I remarked, filled with pride as I watched her dedication. Seeing you work so hard at that company reminded me of my own dreams when I was younger. I believe that's why I've made it this far. It's all thanks to you and your father. Thank you so much, Mom. I expressed my gratitude, feeling a deep sense of appreciation. Promise me to always be my mom, Amy, she implored, her voice filled with sincerity. From now on, let's get along even better than before. After all, we only have each other, I replied, feeling a newfound sense of closeness. Upon my father's death, the truth was revealed, and I accepted the reality of our situation. Deciding to live on with just my mother and me, I contemplated moving back to my hometown and living together with her again. I don't cook, so my mother is concerned about my poor diet and is supportive of me coming back, I explained, feeling touched by her care. My father would probably be surprised that we're getting along so well. His house, company, and inheritance that he left behind. I'll protect them at all costs while continuing to get along with my mother in order to become a real family. I vowed, determined to honor my father's legacy. We visited the graves of my father and my biological mother, my mother's older sister, to give our daily life updates. After going through the process of adoption, I finally became registered as my mother's daughter, forging a bond